Morning, everyone. I'm Megan Matheson, or good afternoon, depending on your location. I'm the Director of Strategy and Engagement for Clear Seas, and I'm happy to welcome you all to this webinar about some of our new research that we are pleased to share. So before we get started today, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that I'm joining from the traditional ancestral lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations here in North Vancouver, and express my gratitude for their stewardship of these lands and waters since time immemorial. To start off today, we have a number of speakers that have joined us. And just to give you a quick rundown of the plan, first, we're going to have a presentation from Clara Kaufman and Veronique Trudeau about the research that was undertaken, how we went about it, what we learned. And then we will move into a panel discussion where we will have a few other speakers join, and then there'll be an opportunity for questions from the audience. So please feel free at any time to put your questions into the chat, or if you'd rather hang on to your questions, and you can always, when we get to the Q&A part, raise your hand and I will be happy to have you ask your question directly. So either of those options are open to you. And I will just go through our introductions before I hand it over to Clara to tell you all about the research. So Clara Kaufman is a research lead with Clear Seas, and she has a multidisciplinary background in geography, public health, and psychology, with extensive experience in research and data analysis and an overarching focus on health and social equity. Clara is key in our research program in many ways, and she scopes and leads research projects and is involved with many academic partners, undertakes GIS map making and data visualization, and also mentors student researchers in our Indigenous internship program. Clara is based in Montreal, and she has an MA in geography from McGill University. We also have with us today Veronique Trudeau, a program manager from Green Marine. She's been with the Green Marine team since 2019 and coordinates the St. Lawrence Advisory Committee, providing support for the participants in that region. She coordinates the technical committee for ports, the seaway, terminals, and shipyards, communicating in French, and is responsible for the majority of the performance indicators applicable to these participant categories. Veronique also leads various working groups that are tasked with reviewing the program required for updates and further development. And particularly relevant for this research is she oversaw the development for the new aquatic ecosystems performance indicator, which you will hear more about later. On our panel today, we have Debbie Murray, who is the Senior Director of Policy and Regulatory Affairs with the Association of Canadian Port Authorities. And Debbie offers us over 20 years of executive level experience in international public policy, regulatory affairs, governance, sustainability, research, communications, advocacy, and stakeholder relations. Debbie has been with ACPA since 2016. Prior to her current role, Debbie was the Director of Policy and Regulatory Affairs for the Canadian Shipowners Association. So a long history with working in the marine industry. We also have Paul Topping, the Director of Regulatory and Environmental Affairs for the Chamber of Marine Commerce. Paul is an expert in marine shipping regulations and environmental protection, with goals to continue advancing Canada's competitiveness as a key player in sustainable shipping worldwide. Paul has been with the Chamber of Marine Commerce since 2017, with previous roles with Transport Canada and Environment Canada, working on marine environmental protection and shipping topics. So an illustrious panel. And I will now hand over to Clara to take us through the research process, the methodology, objectives, and the results that we saw. Over to you, Clara.
Great, thanks so much, Megan. All right, well, we'll dive right into it. I'm very excited to present to you our project, Mapping Canadian Maritime Industry Initiatives to UN Sustainable Development Goals. We'll start with an introduction to the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, for anyone not very familiar with them, or as a refresher. The SDGs are a collection of 17 interlinked global goals for sustainability set up by the United Nations in 2015 and intended to be achieved by 2030. The goals cover a range of topics for sustainable development. Each of the 17 goals has specific targets used to measure success of that goal. The SDGs were designed to be accomplished at the national level, and local implementation is left up to each nation and to the organizations and individuals within. While the SDGs were originally conceived for action on a national level, they also provide a useful universal framework that can be applied to different contexts, such as specific industries, and have increasingly been used in industry reporting.
Clara, I'm just going to pause you for 1 second. I don't think we can see your screen if you were intending to share it.
Oh, really? Okay. Thank you for letting me know. Let me try again. Now can you see it?
Yes. Take it away.
All right. And you can see just the slides, yeah?
Yeah.
All right, perfect. All right, well, this is what you should have been seeing. So you're probably, if you're at all familiar with the SDGs, you've probably seen these colorful icons before that show all 17 of the goals. So for this study, we referenced a model that's referred to as the SDG wedding cake model due to its shape. You can see it kind of looks like a wedding cake, and it was developed by researchers at the Stockholm Resilience Center at Stockholm University. The model organizes the SDGs into 3 thematic areas: biosphere, society, and economy, that build on each other to Goal 17, partnership for the goals. We refer to these themes to group the SDGs throughout our research. Every year, the UN releases a report on the progress of each country toward meeting the SDGs. As of 2024, Canada was ranked 25th out of 167 countries, with 78% of its targets achieved. SDG 1, no poverty, is the only SDG currently on track to be achieved, whereas the rest still face challenges. In the center, you can see how many targets for each of the goals has been achieved or is on track. And if you want to learn more about this, you can see it on the United Nations website in more detail. Within the Canadian maritime industry, there have been varied efforts that support Canada's progress toward the SDGs, but to date, there's no summary of if and how these efforts are being captured. Within Canada, those in the maritime industry use various environmental and sustainability metrics to report their progress, which can make it difficult to compare or gauge overall impact at an industry level. The SDGs provide a universal, internationally understood structure to summarize industry's sustainability efforts. Green Marine, the leading voluntary environmental certification program for the maritime industry in North America, identified an opportunity to link their performance indicators to the SDGs to show how their members are contributing. This project has been over 2 years in the making. The concept originated from discussions with the Clear Seas Research Advisory Committee in spring 2022. In our annual ranking of potential research topics, SDGs in the Canadian maritime industry scored highest and had the most interest. After scoping the idea further, we met with Green Marine and the Association of Canadian Port Authorities in winter 2023. Research kicked off in the summer of 2023 with the Green Marine mapping portion being completed then in collaboration with Green Marine. ACPA provided input and review after the analysis was complete. The overarching question of our research was, how does the Canadian maritime industry contribute to achieving the UN SDGs, and is this contribution being captured? To do so, our objectives included analyzing which SDGs are most relevant to the maritime industry, mapping the Green Marine certification performance indicators to SDG targets, and then from this mapping exercise, creating a tool that can be used to map maritime industry initiatives to SDG targets, identifying how Canadian maritime industry players are already using the SDGs in their reporting and areas where further opportunities exist, and lastly, identifying recommendations and best practices for reporting and furthering progress on SDGs in the Canadian maritime industry. To achieve these objectives, there were 2 stages of research, the mapping exercise and the industry content analysis. For part 1, we started by categorizing the SDGs and identifying SDG targets by relevance for the maritime industry. We then completed the Green Marine mapping exercise, and from this created a mapping tool template that others could use to map their own work to SDG targets if desired. In part two, we conducted a content analysis of industry reporting on SDGs to identify how SDGs are being reported on now and which SDGs are most mentioned in reporting. So we'll go through part one first, which is the mapping exercise. We started off by categorizing the SDGs by relevance for maritime industry contribution. This categorization is meant as a starting point for organizations interested in engaging with the SDGs on where to begin their efforts, though of course relevance may vary by individual organization. The categories were derived from a 2017 study commissioned by the Norwegian Shipowners Association and carried out by DNV. We combined impact and relevance scores from their original study to create three categories: high potential, SDGs most relevant to the maritime industry, medium potential, those with some relevance to the industry, and low potential, those with limited relevance to the industry. As you can see, 8 goals were identified as high potential, 3 from the biosphere theme, 3 from society, and 2 from economy. 7 were categorized as medium potential for relevance, and 2 as low potential for relevance. Though all of them, as you can also see, have some relevance. From there, in order to do the mapping exercise, we went a level deeper and coded the targets under each SDG as relevant or not relevant to the maritime industry. The initial coding was taken from the same 2017 study by DNV and supplemented by Clear Seas internal review and a 2021 study by McNeil and colleagues. In total, we identified 61 targets as relevant to the maritime industry, with at least 1 target under each goal. Once this was done, we were ready to map the SDG targets to the Green Marine Performance Indicators. And for that section, I'll hand it over to Veronique.
Thank you, Clara. So, thanks everyone for being here. So in the next few slides, I'll be presenting the methodology and results for the part of the study relating to the Green Marine Program. So quick reminder, the Green Marine Program is a voluntary environmental certification program for the maritime industry that aims to encourage participants, namely ship owners, ports, terminal and shipyard operators, as well as seaway corporations, to exceed regulatory requirements and promote a culture of continual improvement. This voluntary initiative was actually launched 17 years ago. The program has greatly evolved over the years, passing from 6 performance indicators in the initial version of the program in 2008, up to 14 performance indicators in 2023, thereby covering most of the important environmental issues and challenges that the industry is facing. Each indicator is composed of a series of criteria ranging from level 1 monitoring of regulation up to level 5, the highest level of certification a participant can achieve, with criteria showing excellence in leadership. So for more information on the program, because of course we won't go into the details of all the performance indicators today, I encourage you all to visit our website. You can access the full summaries of the indicators for each industry sector. So we were really glad to accept the offer of Clear Seas back in 2023 to take part in this study, because we already planned to actually assess our program indicators relating to the UN SDGs. So that was a great opportunity for us. Noting here that it is largely an environmental program with 12 indicators addressing issues related to air, water, and soil quality, biodiversity, and waste management. But the program also includes 2 other performance indicators, more on touching on social aspects and aiming to reduce the impacts of maritime industry landside operations on the local community, as well as maintaining and improving community relations. You can move to the next slide, please, Clara. Thanks. So our contribution to this study was to determine how our 14 performance indicators can encourage actions from the various maritime industry sectors to contribute or play a role in achieving the UN SDGs. And to do this work, we started by creating a simple matrix linking, whether directly or indirectly, the various program performance indicators to each of the SDG target, as Clara mentioned earlier. A quick note here that to indicate that we originally thought of doing this exercise at the criterion level, but we quickly realized that once the overarching objective of a performance indicator in the program is linked to an SDG or a target, then all the criteria in that performance indicator are by default also linked to that SDG or target. So we kept it at the performance indicator level. And the higher the level of certification a port, ship owner, a terminal, or a shipyard operator, for example, achieves in the various applicable performance indicator, obviously the stronger the contribution to each of the SDGs. For the purpose of this webinar, I'll be presenting only one graph and one table that you can find in the report that I believe provide a really good overview of the overall results found relative to the Green Marine program in this study. For more details, of course, I encourage everyone to also consult the full report that has been published on the ClearSeas website. So this first graph shown on this slide gives an overall view of where and to what extent the Green Marine program indicators are linked to the SDGs with regards to the number of targets that the program addresses, combining both direct and indirect links. As Clara mentioned, there are overall 169 targets for the 17 SDGs. ClearSeas analysis reports that the maritime industry can potentially contribute to achieving 61 of those 169 targets more significantly. Our analysis then showed that the Green Marine program encourages the different maritime industry stakeholders to implement measures that can contribute to 25 of those 61 targets that have been found to be relevant to the maritime industry. Given the environmental focus of the Green Marine program, we of course expected our performance indicator to be more or less strongly linked to all of the biosphere-related SDGs, namely goal number 6, clean water and sanitation, goal 13, climate action, goal 14, life below water, and 15, life on land. In fact, we found that the program is linked to 13 or 81% of the 16 targets identified as relevant to the maritime industry under those biosphere-related SDGs. So that's really good news. Some of the Green Marine indicators are also linked to the society-related goals, like goal number 3, as you can see on this slide. Look for the green bars actually showing the number of targets related to in the Green Marine program related to the SDGs. So goal number 3, good health and well-being, 7, affordable and clean energies, and goal 11, sustainable cities and communities, or that actually represents 20% of the 20 society-related targets. And finally, the Green Marine program is also linked to some of the economy-related goals, namely goal number 8, decent work and economic growth, goal number 9, industry, innovation and infrastructure, and goal number 12, responsible consumption and production. And that represents 44% of the 16 economy targets. It was also actually interesting to see that all 8 SDGs identified by ClearSeas as high potential for the maritime industry contribution were also linked to the Green Marine program. And 7 of the medium SDGs identified by ClearSeas with medium potential were also related. Some of them were also related to the Green Marine program, namely goals 6, 9, and 17. And it's not really surprising as well to see that the 2 low potential SDGs identified by ClearSeas, goals number 1 and 10, were actually found not to be related or linked to the Green Marine program whatsoever. So next slide, please. As indicated previously, the Green Marine program encourages maritime industry stakeholders to contribute to 11 of the 17 goals, which represents more than half of these goals. Now, this table looks at each Green Marine performance indicator individually and indicates more specifically to which SDGs they can contribute, whether directly when looking at the dark blue cells or indirectly looking at pale blue cells. I'm just going to mention a few interesting points that I want to highlight with regards to this table is that, first of all, the greenhouse gas related performance indicators, which are applicable to all sectors of participants in the program, are the indicators that are linked to the largest number of SDGs, a total of 10 goals. Interestingly, which I'm actually very happy about, is that the Green Marine's newest performance indicator on aquatic ecosystems, which is only applicable to ports at this point, is highly relevant in this study. This indicator is linked to 9 different SDGs and is actually the indicator that has the largest number of links with the SDG targets with a total of 16 overall. If you look on our website, you will not see yet results for our ports for this performance indicator because it was optional in 2023. But as of June 2025, when we release our 2024 results, you will see the first results from our ports for this performance indicator. Another interesting point is that all 14 performance indicators are directly linked to goal number 12. So that column where you see dark cells all across from top to bottom, this is the goal on responsible consumption and production. So it was interesting to see that all our performance indicators are contributing to actually one of the targets, target 6, which is to encourage companies, especially large and transnational companies, to adopt sustainable practices and to integrate sustainability information into their reporting cycle. So the program encourages that all of the indicators do that. There are also 2 goals that are linked to 10 performance indicators, each including multiple direct links. So you can look at the column under goal 6, clean water and sanitation, and goal 14, life below water, which I've talked about before. And clearly, I think that the Green Marine participants through the Green Marine certification and implementation of the program's criteria can contribute and report on many of the SDGs. On our end, for Green Marine, we will for sure use these findings to develop online resources to make it much easier for our members and the general public to identify the links between the Green Marine performance indicators and the relevant SDGs. And then I'll pass it back to you, Clara.
Great, thank you, Veronique. Well, with the mapping exercise complete, we moved into part 2, the content analysis of industry reporting, which was conducted solely by Clear Seas. The scope of this analysis was limited to the maritime industry in Canada and focused on 4 sectors: ship owners, port authorities, shipyards, and terminal operators. International ship owners were classified as operating in Canada if they had at least 1 office in Canada. Other areas of marine activity, notably fishing, were not considered. Other entities beyond the scope of this study included pilotages, ferries, tugs and barges, cruise ships, and fleets with fewer than 3 vessels. These inclusion and exclusion criteria guided a systematic search of all relevant industry players operating in Canada under the 4 main sectors. The final list included 16 ship owners, 17 port authorities, 17 shipyards, and 33 terminal operators. 34. Industry reports examined in the study included business annual reports and or sustainability reports as available. If there was no report available, the organization's website was searched for SDG content. The analysis was completed in January 2024 and reflects reports available at that time. Data collected included whether the organization had a report, if the report mentioned SDGs, and if so, in what detail. Did they specify which SDGs? Did they map SDGs to their own initiatives? And did they reference SDG targets? In total, just over 2/3 of Canadian maritime industry reports mentioned the SDGs. You can see that here with the totals. Of the 4 industry sectors, ship owners were most likely to have a report available with around 80%. And of those, they were most likely to mention SDGs with around 90%, followed by port authorities with around 60% having a report, of which half mentioned the SDGs. For terminal operators, around a quarter had a report, of which half mentioned SDGs. And then shipyards had to be excluded from much of the analysis because only 1 out of 17 shipyards had a report. While all 4 industry sectors had at least 1 report that mentioned the SDGs, and many of them mentioned specific SDGs, there were fewer reports that mapped the SDGs to company initiatives, about 1/3 overall, and fewer still that referred to specific SDG targets, about 12% overall. We also examined which SDGs were being mentioned. The content analysis of the industry reports revealed where organizations were reporting the most effort and impact toward the SDGs. The 4 SDGs most frequently identified in maritime industry reporting included 2 goals from the biosphere category, goal number 13, climate action, and number 14, life below water, and 2 goals from the economy category, goal number 8, decent work and economic growth, and number 9, industry, innovation, and infrastructure. You can see these were mentioned in at least 3/4 of reports across ship owners, port authorities, and terminal operators for all 4 of the most frequent. If we go look back to our initial categorization of potential for relevance, there are 4 high potential goals that were mentioned in less than 50% of reports. Those are goal number 7, clean energy, goal number 3, good health, goal number 11, sustainable cities, and goal number 15, life on land. Relevance will vary from organization to organization, but these SDGs could be a good starting point to investigate if there is opportunity for further contributions from the industry. The 4 SDGs least identified in maritime industry reporting included 3 goals from the society category. Number 1, no poverty. Number 2, zero hunger. And number 11, sustainable cities. And 1 goal from the economy category. Number 10, reduce inequalities. From our categorization, goals 1 and 10 were both categorized as low potential for relevance, and goal 2 was medium, but we did find it surprising that goal 11 was not mentioned in reports more often, given that it seemed to have high potential for relevance to the industry. Lastly, we'll take a quick look at the mapping tool template provided with the report. From our content analysis, it's clear that there are many ways to reference the SDGs in reporting. For those who would like to do a detailed mapping of SDG targets to their company initiatives, we've created an easy to use and flexible mapping tool template. It's an Excel file that's downloadable on our website with instructions. Basically, the user can write their past, current, or future initiatives in the top row here, and then they can identify targets that this initiative contributes to in the squares below and highlight them there. We've also included some more information if it's of interest. We have in the first column the 3 themes, biosphere, economy, and society. We then have whether the target was identified in our study as relevant to the maritime industry, and then the potential for relevance categories, low, medium, high. Though these can all also be removed if they're not of interest for your work. And targets identified as relevant are highlighted in blue just for easy reference. Mapping will vary from organization to organization, which of the targets are most important or most relevant. But even if an organization only wants to refer to the SDGs at a higher level, they can use this tool on the back end as a record that supports which SDGs they choose to highlight in their reporting. And this is just an example of what it can look like. This is the green marine mapping. So the green marine performance indicators are listed at the top, and then cells are highlighted in dark green for targets they're directly related to, and light green for indirectly related for each of the indicators. And then at the bottom, they've put together a summary of which SDGs and which targets were addressed by the performance indicators. In summary, SDGs are becoming an increasingly common metric to include in maritime industry sustainability reporting in Canada, that there is wide variation in how they're referenced. Some organizations use SDGs as themes, but do not link the SDGs to specific company initiatives or do not reference specific SDG targets. At a base level, Canadian organizations are already contributing to SDGs just by following national and local regulations, which we touch on in our report. And then further, organizations with green marine certification clearly contribute to at least 11 out of 17 SDGs through maintaining their certification. Our content analysis suggests that there's room for more attention given to targets under SDGs 3, 7, 11, and 15. Through reviewing industry materials, it was clear to me that there is lots of industry work being done currently that contributes to SDGs, but it's not all actively being mapped yet to them. So we've created a shareable mapping tool template for anyone who is interested industry actors who want to map their work to SDGs in a more in-depth way and are looking for a place to start. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Clara and Veronique. That was a great overview. So we're going to transition into some questions now. I've got a few questions to start off with, and I encourage anyone in the audience, if you have something you'd like to ask, please feel free to use the chat function to type your question in. You can either send it directly to me and I'll read it out for you. You can share it with everyone, I think possibly, or maybe you can only send it to me. Anyways, we'll see in a moment if people try a question, and or feel free to raise your hand and you can unmute to ask your question directly. So welcoming Debbie and Paul to join Veronique and Clara to talk a little bit about their thoughts on this study and the research. So I'm going to start off with Debbie. Before the study, what did you anticipate about how SDGs were being incorporated into maritime company sustainability reporting? Was it something you thought about at all? Were you surprised by anything that we saw?
Thanks, Megan, and great presentation, Clara and Veronique. I wasn't surprised. In fact, for ports, I mean, sustainability really is at the core of what they do. They have a mandate to protect the environment, work with communities, and be accountable. So, sustainability really is in some ways another word for what they were already doing. So, wasn't surprised there. I think this research was really important in terms of kind of within the context of the term sustainability and SDGs, it's important to have that conversation and start to sort of, scratch the surface and discover what ports and the industry are doing in relation to SDGs. So, no, I wasn't surprised, and I was actually quite pleased to see the results, and just in terms of surfacing SDGs on their own, and then of course the linkage to green marine.
Thanks. Paul, the same question for you. Before you saw the results of this study, had you noticed anything about SDGs in the marine sector and sustainability reporting, and were you surprised by anything you saw here?
Thank you. And my time in government goes back to when these SDGs were being developed in different forms in the past. And so I have awareness of them through my career. In looking at the marine industry, I was aware there was a lot of work associated with that, but what this report does is actually bring it into a summary to show just how much of the marine industry actually works towards that. And that was something that I was surprised at. It was the extent to which the marine industry is linking in to the contribution to these goals.
And Veronique, I mean, you said already that Green Marine had been planning to do an exercise like this for some time. What were you anticipating before we started this effort?
Well, yeah, Megan, actually, I think it's important to mention that the Green Marine Certification Program, we actually, Green Marine program managers, don't see our participants' reports. It's our external verifiers that verify participants that get to see those types of documents. I have to say that I was a bit surprised with the results, that there ain't that much SDG reporting in the reports of our Green Marine participants or other industry stakeholder. But I'm hoping that with this study, that it will encourage, Green Marine participants to report more on SDGs.
Great, thank you. So moving on, let's talk a little bit about the implications of this research for the maritime industry, and maybe about the implications for Canada more broadly. Debbie, would you like to comment on what you think, perhaps port authorities could do with this work?
Yeah, happy to. So I think there's definitely value in the research for our members, our 17 Canada port authorities. As I mentioned, they're already, they are leaders in terms of much of this work. Some of them develop their own measurement and reporting methods. But I think specifically, probably one of the key parts of value of this research is that all 17 of the CPAs are members of Green Marine. And so at number one and number two, there's a variation in the resources that are available to CPAs. So not all of them can produce a dedicated sustainability report or have a dedicated sort of SDG program with specific metrics, but they all participate in Green Marine. So I think one of the key values out of this research is, it does leverage work that's already being done, and it connects it to a global framework. So I think there's a huge amount of value in that. And I see that really helping the ports in terms of those that choose to maybe do a systematic assessment of SDGs within their own localized context to see what works for them. And then maybe turn around and say, okay, well, we've picked these, and are we already collecting for Green Marine? So I think there's a huge amount of value that way.
Yeah, it does make it easier for sure. Paul, from your perspective, working with Canadian ship operators, where do you see the value from this?
I think the biggest value, simply put, is it shows just what your own activities, if you're not doing this report or looking at these goals, your own activities are actually already meeting them. So you're already doing the work. Why not take some credit for meeting that? So I think it's a good proposition to people. All our ship owner members are members of Green Marine, and quite a few of them, in fact, are founding members of Green Marine. So it's something we're proud of, and I think this report just illustrates what the shipping industry and the marine industry as a whole is actually working on and contributing towards the betterment of sustainable development.
Yeah, and if I could add to that, Megan, I think also what it does is it creates an opportunity for common conversations. If you do have, within Green Marine, there's an opportunity for a common conversation, which, it's what makes the program so strong. But then also within SDGs, like if there's a way to link, again, then within the framework of the SDGs, this research and the work that's being done, it can provide a way to kind of build more capacity.
Definitely, thank you. And Veronique, do you have anything to add from a Green Marine perspective as to the implications?
Well, I think that to add on what Paul and Debbie just said, I mean, the study clearly shows that there's multiple opportunities for the maritime industry to contribute to the SDGs. From a Green Marine standpoint, our performance indicators provide dozens and dozens of measures that the industry can implement to contribute to the SDGs. So I must say I was very happy to see how our new indicator on aquatic ecosystem, for example, for ports is strongly linked to multiple SDGs in the program, just to name this one. And this indicator proposes multiple actions in a stepwise process, just like all our other indicators, but to contribute to these different goals. And some ports are already taking action to reduce their impact on life below water, for example. But for many ports, this will be a new steps that they will be taking. So I see lots of opportunities to contribute.
Amazing. Paul, you mentioned that you've had some past experience with the SDGs from your previous role in government work. Can you comment on, we focused on the Canadian context, but can you comment on if there is other SDGs that could be relevant beyond Canada, or even, ones that we maybe flagged as, low, medium or lower relevance to the marine sector that you think maybe there could be a link that I think people could think about?
Absolutely. Probably the biggest one is by far number one, which in our Canadian domestic context, we sort of left as a bit of not relevant. But if you look at the global picture around the world, the marine shipping industry provides the services to 90% of the world's trade, and that means these smaller developing countries are coming out and are improving the sustainability of for their citizens. Their lifestyle, their standard of living is increasing because marine shipping is enabling them to recognize the opportunities for exports, to bring in materials into their countries that they need, and support. So these are things that are, absolutely a big deal. And it's actually what the industry itself does. often when we talk about sustainable development, we start looking at, okay, we do this work over here, set it aside, and we look at all the different things that the pollutant issues and other the various challenges that arise from shipping and impacts of shipping, and try to address them. But sometimes we forget the services that we actually provide in and of itself contribute to the well-being of many people around the world. And this is not just somebody being able to have the latest iPhone in their hand. This is people being able to afford to eat. And that's big. And that lets them gain some food security. And then from that, health security. And then they can get into getting the latest iPhone, or perhaps between there, go from a bicycle to maybe a motorbike, things like that. If one reads Hans Rosling, you can Google it. He's a former UN statistician. He's passed away, but he's written a tremendous book on how countries are developing and how people are being lifted out of poverty every day. And that, I think, is probably the single biggest thing the shipping industry is playing a central role in. I'll stop there.
Thanks. Debbie, would you like to add on anywhere where you see opportunities for incorporating the SDGs more into the maritime sector and any benefits to doing so? I think you already touched on this a little bit before. It gives people a confidence.
I mean, I think there definitely are opportunities. I mean, collectively, the industry is going in that direction. You know, it has and it does operate in a responsible manner, but I think it adds an opportunity to integrate individual efforts into a global effort, right? Because it is a globally regulated industry. It operates globally. And so, yes, we have a domestic lens here, but globally, for Canada to fit with the global framework, it's useful to use global frameworks such as SDGs. So I think there's definitely an opportunity overall. Yeah, I mean, I can't really speak for the other parts of the industry specifically, but I do think there's definitely an opportunity. And I think, again, like I've said before, they are doing a lot. It's just, this is just one way of kind of labeling phenomena that are happening. It's a standardized way that people all understand. So that's the value.
Thanks, Debbie. Veronique, more specifically, do you think that the results we've seen from this study could inform the creation of any new green marine performance indicators?
That's a good question. We've been hearing from our participants that they want us to slow down on developing new indicators. But you know, given the mission and scope of the Green Marine Program, which is largely environmentally focused, I don't believe that the study will necessarily lead to the creation of new performance indicators, but it can definitely inform us on program revisions, because every year we have a plan to review a few indicators, and during this revision process, I mean, it would be a good habit to you know, consider the matrix that we've created and see how we can improve, revise, and make our indicators evolve to include more and more actions that are relevant or linked to the SDGs, definitely.
Just another call out to the audience. Is there anybody who would like to ask a question directly? Feel free to raise your hand and unmute yourself, and we can do that. I will note that Captain Fernandez has raised a few questions in the chat, and as they are relating to inspections of Canadian goods at port facilities, I think I would have to redirect those questions and suggest that you contact Transport Canada directly to speak to their inspections team. Unfortunately, we don't have anybody from Transport Canada here on our panel to be able to speak to those particular questions.
If I may,
oh yeah, go ahead, Paul.
Receiving end of some of the regular inspections, not necessarily the port state control side, but I have seen the chat, and I can respond to the questions he's asking. Yes, inspections are carrying on with the latest code and looking at dangerous goods segregation in containers. Also, with the problem of container fires, there's nothing there at the upcoming Marine Environment Protection Committee session that's going to be happening at the end of the week. That is correct, but that's committee is not directly attached to. That's the safety committee. Likely there will be a role there with the pollution prevention and response. There might be some contribution from that committee, but work is going on in the container fires. Our organization is a member of the International Chamber of Shipping, and container fires are one of the front and center safety issues that we are looking at, working with IMO, and there is work going on there. So I'll stop that. I'm not sure what the third comment about that is specifically, but if it's linked to container fires and container management, suffice to say there is work underway to improve standards.
Thank you, Paul. It's great to have the benefit of your experience here. Anybody else have any questions that they've raised or would like to raise to Clara, Veronique, Debbie, or Paul on the topic of SDGs and how they relate to the maritime sector? And okay, so seeing none at the moment, I just want to pose one last question to everyone, and I'll start with Paul. So as Clara shared, we created this mapping tool as part of the process of doing this project, but also with the idea that people could make use of this tool in the future to help guide their sustainability reporting. I think as you raised, people are already doing this work. It'd be great if they got credit for it too, and help ease the path of sustainability reporting, so organizations can focus more on the work they're doing and less on how do we actually share this in a way that other people can understand the impact is of this. Do you think that organizations might be able to use this to inspire additional work that they might want to do in the realm of sustainability, and come up with new things that they could take on if they're looking for ways to contribute?
I think from our members' perspectives, I think they'll likely be trying to do better on what they're already doing and make further improvement. So that's what something new would look like. Some of our companies might be still quite interested in branching into new areas, but again, we have members that have a lot of resources attached and other members that take it seriously, but they only have so many resources to go around. So we got a mix of people. It does guide, and what Veronique said about Green Marine, I think it does guide our members as to sort of where there's some strengths and maybe where there's some weaknesses, and to take a look at, or where there's strengths to further build from. So it just depends on the perspectives you're trying to take. And if you're looking at your own reporting approach and you're seeing that your actual activities are actually doing these things, you want to make sure that's covered. But it's then areas that maybe where you don't have that, you want to maybe think about. And those are areas that you might be able to look at some other. I think it's certainly be useful for informing people in terms of their overall areas of what their activities represent.
Thanks so much, Paul. Veronique, what do you think in terms of we've used this mapping tool for the Green Marine indicators. From what you see of a range of companies across Canada, do you think that the tool will be helpful?
I hope it will be, honestly. I mean, it was useful for us to see how our program was relating to the to the United Nations SDGs. So now that the matrix is, all set up, it's easy for any participant in the program to just, check boxes to see where they're actually currently taking action, and seeing also making it obvious where can they also take actions if they're not already doing it, or improving and building on what they're already doing. And like Paul and Debbie said, lots of our participants are already taking part in multiple projects and taking measures, implementing, actions in line with SDGs, but not necessarily reporting to them. So, but yeah, I think it's going to be a useful tool for them to assess where they stand relative to the SDGs, and then they can build on that. So we're for sure going to try to encourage our members to use it.
Megan, could I just add on something to that?
Absolutely. Go right ahead.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say, that I think the intention with the matrix and the tool is just to provide a starting point. I think as Debbie has mentioned, many people already are doing their own work on the SDGs in the industry, but there are also many who aren't. And just speaking from experience on this project, it can be kind of daunting where to begin when you know, really get into it and you see there's 17, there are this many targets, you know, like I found getting started was, you know, the most difficult part. So we're hoping that with this sort of simple and flexible tool, if someone feels like that, they have somewhere that they could begin that just provides them with all of the targets and they can easily start to see how it relates to their work.
Thanks, Clara. That's great. And Debbie, from your perspective, thinking about how port authorities might be able to use this mapping tool to support their sustainability reporting.
Yeah, thanks. So I agree with everything that's been said so far, definitely. I think for my members, so we've been talking about sustainability within one of we have a sustainability committee actually, and the conversation around UN SDGs is one that we've been having for a good 5 years now. And, you know, it's sort of collectively, how do you build capacity, and then how do you support each other? Number one, and number two, how do you, you know, individual ports, as I've mentioned, there's varying level of research resources. So how does a port that has limited resources, limited staff, you know, and all these other obligations in terms of operating, how do they then, you know, potentially look to use SDGs? That's you know, another consideration. I think that this and the third point that's really really important, and is actually the starting point. So you've got resources and local the local is the actual local and the strategic. What is the port doing? What is the context of the port? Are there a lot of First Nations in the port? Are they in a metropolitan area, an urban area? Like, there are a number of factors that will dictate the strategy of the port, the operations of the port, and then the you know, the SDGs that they will be picking. And so from my experience, what I've seen is that within our membership, it varies. You know, they will systematically look at SDGs, and, you know, they may pick one or two and maybe more, and they're not all going to be the same. So I think that's where the value of this comes in. And as Clara said, it's a starting point, especially for some of the smaller ports, or maybe the ports that are not as resourced. So, you know, we're building knowledge here, we're building capacity, we're giving people a tool. I see in the chat, Claude, thank you, Claude Deschambault from Port of Montreal. Thank you so much for putting that link up. He's referencing the work by Professor David Tremblay, the University of Quebec. And it's something that ACPA, we did support and help him to connect with our members in terms of research that he did. He did a mapping exercise on 69 of the metrics that are within the SDGs. And as he mentioned, as Claude has mentioned, it was 8 of our CPAs. So that's another piece of information and knowledge. So we're just hoping that, you know, we can build knowledge, that this tool can help, that what Professor Tremblay has done can also help, and that collectively, you know, all of this conversation can help us basically, as Paul said, do better. We're already doing great work. It's just, how can we do it better?
And share it so that people know the great work that's being done.
Yeah.
All
it's
right.
early days in some ways. Yeah.
Absolutely. We're on a journey. Our last call for any questions related to how the SDGs and the maritime industry are connected. Otherwise, we might wrap up a few minutes early. Okay, comment here from Philip Westaby. The report wasn't able to obtain enough information to map shipyards to SDGs. Given the ongoing national shipbuilding strategy program across Canadian shipyards, is there a plan to gather more data from Canadian shipyards to encourage them to report out their SDG compliance? Clara, do you want to comment on the reason why we weren't able to map shipyards?
Yeah, well, I would just say there's not on our end, there's not a plan to gather more data. But yeah, the reason that we couldn't include them as much in this study was just that they're less likely to have reports. But I will say that looking at their websites, that was one area where I saw, okay, a lot of these are very clearly contributing to the SDGs through their work. So it was more just that they didn't have public facing reports that showed that. So we weren't able to comment on it in our report. But I think it could be an interesting area to look further.
Yeah, well, we'll consider this a call out to shipyards to maybe use this tool as a way to help them report on some of the great work they're doing under the National Shipbuilding Strategy.
Maybe I can add here that we are welcoming more and more shipyards in the program in recent years. And maybe through the Green Marine Program indicators, more and more shipyards will start reporting on their sustainable, measures that they're implementing, and hopefully also relating to the SDGs.
Right. And I'll just acknowledge Captain Benny Fernandez has asked a few more questions, but as they're on the topic of cargo safety, which is not the focus of today's webinar, we will not be endeavoring to answer them in the last few minutes we have here. I want to thank everybody very much for your participation. Thank you so much to our wonderful panelists, Debbie Murray, Paul Topping, Veronique Trudeau, and of course, Clara Kaufman, who led this really interesting research project. And thank you all to the participants. We will send out the recording and the slides after the webinar is complete, and it will also be posted on the ClearSeas website, where you, of course, can find the full report and the mapping tool to download. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining today. Have a great rest of your day.